and the chief executive of Aqua Gardens. This is an organization who's been very good to WiseTribe in helping us bring sustainable food education, particularly around sort of systems thinking through the use of aquaponics. And so with that, I don't know, Mason, if you can unmute or if you're on board here, we'd love to introduce you. But just before we do that, I want to thank Mason and his company for helping WiseTribe with setting up our first aquaponic system at a school, which is with our partner, South Tech Preparatory Academy in Boynton Beach. We've got an incredible program with this school where we're actually leading the notion of food citizenship and youth leadership, and that our plan in this 3-year program with this school is that South Tech is really going to be increasingly positioning itself as a food citizenship institute of learning. And it's not just stopping with children, but really the goal there is to become a community center of learning for well-being. So that would include both parents and others from the community that have an interest in really understanding food sustainability, not only for sort of self-sustaining, but also the future of food, particularly as it relates to food production with lower cost and tax to the environment and using technology to do those things. So thank you, Sylvia, excuse me, for all of your help here. And we'd love for you to just share more about aquaponics with us.
How you guys doing? Can you hear me?
You're a little, can you up the volume a little bit?
Is that better?
That's way better.
All right, awesome. Here, let me share my screen. All right, so you guys can see this?
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to give a little presentation about aquaponics and our way to a sustainable future. So a lot of people always ask me, what is aquaponics? And the easiest way to say this is it's a combination of hydroponics and aquaculture. And what that means is it's a combination of growing plants and raising fish. So traditionally in an aquarium, you feed your fish and then you have a filter that sucks out that waste and puts back clean water. Now, the reason why those filters are super inefficient is because that waste is very valuable. That waste contains nitrates, which is in pretty much all the soil. So what this does is that the roots actually absorb that waste and the plants are able to grow, 10 times quicker using like almost 99% less water. So I'll show you some things. So this is how it works. So we start with the fish. And then you feed the fish produce their waste, and microbes and worms, it could be tiny little worms or earthworms, they break down the solids, and then that converts it from ammonia to nitrates, which the plants absorb, and then they clean the water for the fish. So this is kind of what a system looks like. On the right side, we see the plants in a gravel where there's no soil. So those are little rocks. They could be, river rocks, lava rocks, hydrogen, pretty much any kind of rock just to hold the roots in there. And that acts as your biofilter. So we have the fish down at the left. You can feed the fish. That water pumps it up into that grow bed. The roots clean the water and then it is returned. So it's self-sustaining in a sense. You still have to feed the fish. You still have to plant the seeds and you still have to add water, but everything else takes care of itself in the long run. The history of aquaponics is very interesting because this isn't a new technology. This is a very ancient way of farming. And what the Aztecs and the Mayans and all these ancient civilizations used to do to grow their food were to create these floating islands called chinapas. So as you can see that they're kind of little isolated islands, and those are actually all floating, and the roots do the same thing as in aquaponics. They go into the soil, into those floating beds, and they get the nutrients in the water from the rivers or lakes wherever they had these large gardens, which was able to produce them tons of food, and it was minimum work because they didn't have to worry about watering or like turning the soil like you have to do in large like agriculture. So these are the chinapas, and you can see how they were built. The water would flow underneath, and they would be able to boat to these little farms and farm and always have fresh land to grow. So there's people like throughout the years who have done this all over, more of the Asian countries. They're really good at this, and you can see it still being done in the rice paddies that exist today. There's different types of aquaponic systems. We have the media filled beds, which are rock-based systems, and they are good for growing taller plants that grow fruit like peppers and tomatoes and cucumbers, and they hold the plant in the gravel really well without them falling over. The nutrient film technique is really good. That's what we just built for Jacqueline, the WiseTribe, at a partner's house. And what that is you have let's say a grow cup, which is a small little net cup that has holes in it so it allows water to enter in and out, and you can plant inside that cup and the water runs right through that, and there's no rocks, there's no nothing, it's just water and plants, and the roots are able to be absorbed into all that nutrient rich water, and it cleans it. And then deep water culture is almost the same thing as NFT, except it's not piping, it's usually a deep water reservoir, and then the plants float on top of it, which the roots grow inside that water and get really, really long and big, and they flourish. It's actually quite incredible to see. So the media-based system looks like this. You'll have the rocks. You'll see this theme a lot. You'll have fish below, and then you'll have the plants above, and that's good for gravity, so they're not using a lot of electricity, and it stays sustainable. The types of media that can be used are the perlite, the clay balls, the gravel, and the river rocks, and this also acts like a biofilter. This is what a deep water culture looks like. You can see how there's no rocks at the top. It's just basically, imagine styrofoam laying on the top of the water floating, and you drill holes in there, and then you put cups in those holes, and then you have the plants in there, and they're able to lay at the top of the water as the water passes through, cleaning the water. And these raft systems are pretty incredible because you can grow larger plants. Like as in this picture, this person's growing a banana tree, which is known to get pretty big. It's all depending on how you build the systems, but these system designings are, unlimited. You can do pretty much whatever you want. And this is what the nutrient film technique looks like. So that's short for NFT. We can see the piping up there with the holes, and it passes through. And this is an NFT system done in like a pyramid shape. So going vertical, actually, you can grow a lot of produce in a small amount of area. And this is why I say that this is the future of farming, because you are using 99% less water, you are using less space, and you're able to get a head of lettuce in 30 days, which is pretty incredible all year long. Here's some more vertical farming with the NFT pipes. As you can see, these plants are going to grow on top of each other and just save a ton of space and grow really high quality produce. A lot of people ask, how is this relevant to our lives and why should we get into aquaponics? But with an increase in population and a decrease in arable land, aquaponics is going to change the way that humans get their food, because as we hear, water's running out, land's drying up, soil's just becoming so polluted and nasty. Our oceans get polluted every time there's a huge farming situation nearby, because what happens is you fertilize the soil, that soil runs with all of its nutrients into the groundwater. That groundwater pollution ends up in a canal. The canal ends up in a river, and the river ends up in the ocean, causing these crazy algae blooms and killing tons of fish and wildlife and reefs. And it's really the worst thing that could be on the earth right now. So this is what the population's going like right now. So the demand for food is going to go up, and without any fertile land present in most of the world, we're going to have a hard time feeding people. So what happens too is when you go into an area to clear out land like they do in the Amazon to feed the cattle or whatnot, you're going to have a lot of environmental issues, because what happens is the roots actually hold all the land together. And when that goes away, you're going to have more mudslides. It's just going to be a disaster. So with aquaponics, you can do this indoors, you can do these in facilities, and you don't have to mess with nature or the environment. This can be done anywhere, abandoned buildings, like open fields in the desert. It doesn't matter. This is the future, and it does not need to be harming the environment around it. So land conversion leads to an additional loss of 4 million hectares of land per year. So as we're growing as a population, we're going to have to destroy more wildlife, more nature to build housings, factories, urban needs, and on top of that, farming. And when you farm, you get one head of lettuce in like a square foot, and then you have 1 million people. You have to grow 1 million heads of lettuce. So you're talking acres and acres and miles of land that has to just be for food. But with aquaponics, you can pile those lettuce on top of each other and save tons of land. So land is actually very hard to find fertile, and the more the population grows, the more land loss we're getting for fertile land. So more issues on where our food source is going to come from in the future. Uh, and this is a big one because I was just having a conversation with someone about the Colorado River and how it's drying up, and where in Mexico used to, like, you know, be able to get the last little bit of that water to produce some of their, you know, goods that they sell. And this is insane because the groundwater is becoming polluted. Clean, fresh drinking water is becoming scarce, and we need to save water, but we also need to grow produce. So, like I said, aquaponics is good because it uses 99% less water than traditional farming.
Also, just very quickly, Mason, I think a really key distinction for our audience is to note that it actually also provides a complete source of nutrients. So you're getting not only minerals and vitamins from the plants, but also you end up getting protein from the fish, provided that you have fish stock that is edible.
Yeah. We don't build systems in the mind of eating fish just because a lot of our clients are vegan, and it's not something that most, like, you know, those kind of people want to eat. But yes, you can raise tilapia and different kind of catfish that are very high in protein, that do very well and grow super fast. And this is all ways to have a completed diet if you needed to survive off fish and whatnot. But this is what I was talking about earlier, sources of water pollution. As you can see, no matter where it is, if it's the urban, suburban, or, you know, cropland, animal feed, that all runs into rivers, which end up in the ocean. So this is kind of how it works. You have the farming, it goes into the canals, into the rivers, and destroys everything. As you can read here, so these are some benefits of aquaponics. What Jacqueline was just talking about the fish. It's very important to have fish in your system because the fish are providing the waste for the, or I shouldn't even say waste, but they're providing the food for the plants. Because at the end of the day, without the fish, the plants can't live, and without the plants, the fish can't live. So you're not creating um, just a farm, you're creating an ecosystem. You're creating its own environment with its own chemistry, with its own way of life. And as you grow with that system, and as you get moved forward, the system will actually thrive and become an environment, and it'll be your environment. So this is one system we did at American Heritage School in Delray. And yeah, you guys should check it out and look more into aquaponics, and figure it out, and keep growing. It's the future, and it's an amazing thing to do.
Thank you so much, Mason. And we look forward to having you back on so that we can share more of this incredible information with people. But I guess in the meantime, if somebody wanted to follow you on Facebook, where would they go?
You guys can look up Aqua Garden or Seventh Generation Solutions, but Aqua Garden's where we do all the aquaponics stuff. If you guys use Instagram, you can go to our page at Aquaponics Daily, and we have all of the aquaponics systems we do and more.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your partnership and sharing this wisdom with us today. We look forward to sharing more of it very soon, and for sharing what we're doing together in the community in terms of bringing about sustainable food production.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we have a junior WiseTriber, Kiki Welter, and we also have one of our partners in education, Mrs. Perez, who is an 8th grade science teacher at Carver Middle School.
Hi, good morning. As Jacqueline said, I am an 8th grade science teacher at Carver Middle School. I was actually Kiki's 6th grade science teacher, and she was one of my favorite students to ever have in my class. She's fantastic. Kiki came up with a fantastic science project on hydroponics that actually brought her to the next level of the science fair. And it's pretty amazing what these kids, especially like her, could come up with, because as farmer, as he was saying earlier, I'm so sorry, I'm just blanking. As you said earlier, it's super important now that we think about new ways that we can involve the agricultural system. And this day and age, like right now, it might be hard to think about, well, how am I supposed to grow my own food? I don't have any supplies at home. But it's like it's like what he said with the fish waste and the plant ecosystem. You know, like one fish's waste is another plant's treasure. So if you cannot create your own aquaponic system at home, Kiki here, who is also the co-president of our Junior WiseTribe Sustainability Club, is going to share with us what inspired her to take on this project and how you could do it at home too with more accessible materials.
Yeah, so I'm Kiki and I'm a junior wise triber, and something that inspired me to do this for my science project was actually Miss Perez, and I was having trouble choosing my science project, and I go to her and ask her, like, what could I do? And she says, well, you should try hydroponics. So coincidentally, I go home and actually a magazine we're subscribed to had an article about hydroponics. So I thought it was really interesting and read it, and then I got really interested in it, and I thought it was super cool. And of course, I'm a child, so I don't have a lot of money, so I can't just go and buy my own hydroponics system. So I looked up on the internet how I could create one at home, and yes, this is what I came up with. So the stuff you're gonna need is a plastic water bottle, which I already cut, and you have to cut it at the little curve for the curved ends and a regular water bottle. And then you're gonna need a growing medium, which rock wool for me was the easiest.
And
seeds
can
and
you
water.
tell us what rock wool is?
Yeah, rock wool is a growing medium that you use for hydroponics. There's a lot of other growing mediums, but for me, rock wool was most secure to use when you're just a beginner. And in regular growing methods, you need soil to have your seeds secure in and lay somewhere. And of course, I couldn't have it just laying around in the water, or else it wouldn't grow like it's supposed to. So this is what substitutes soil. Yeah.
Thank you. Hey, Kiki, I'm wondering, just because we've gotten started late, if we could, and I know you've done this for WiseTribe once before, but could we have you back as a special guest to feature just doing this, like, very soon? Just because I'm worried that we won't be able to get through the full demo. And would that be okay with you?
Or wait, do you want? Yeah, okay.
But maybe if we could ask a couple of questions, because also if you, Miss Perez, maybe you could also share how hydroponics helps with some of the soil erosion challenges that we're facing on the planet.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry now that I don't have a presentation that I use with my sixth graders about soil erosion. One of our big topics, especially in Florida, is soil erosion, like our beaches, our intercoastal. To piggyback on that awesome graphic that we saw earlier, what the roots does is it holds the soil in place so that when storms come, or hurricanes here in Florida, or tornadoes, etc., the roots hold everything in place so that they don't get swept away. Now, the thing is, a lot of our soil has already been deprived, and we don't have the same soil quality as we did like 100 years ago, or even 20 years ago, because there's been so much industrial growth in these areas that we're not giving the soil a chance to rest. So what aquaponics and hydroponics especially can be helping with, and why it's so important to either transition to this new style of farming, or to have them side by side working together, is because it's important for us to grow vertically now and learn how we can take up less space, improve our soil quality at the same time, and grow food faster for this blooming population, and also keep it local.
Excellent. I remember actually when Kiki was sharing all of that with me, I was just so impressed that a sixth grader had such a vision. And Kiki also has presented to the city of Delray Beach in terms of food security. And she also helped us write a local proclamation that was presented to the city of Delray Beach in World Food Day 2018, where we dressed up as vegetables. I think Kiki was a strawberry.
I,
But what were you, a
yeah,
strawberry?
yeah.
Exactly. So Kiki, I'm sorry that we're gonna take a little bit time off of yours, but we want to feature more of you. And actually, we're also, because I know you're going to do more hydroponics. Actually, you're going to work on a more advanced kit, and you're going to teach us about that in the days and weeks to come. So I just want to thank you for your leadership. You are an extraordinary young lady and extremely bright, and I always am learning from you. So thank you for helping us today, and I'm so excited to share more of you and your brilliance and your wisdom with our audience in the days to come, particularly around hydroponics.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, stay on with us because we want you around here with us. So we're going to go to our next guest, which is Mel the Worm Queen. And if you do not know about Mel the Worm Queen, you are missing out on an extremely interesting and wise human being. So Mel, I'm going to turn it over to you, and maybe you could explain just a little bit about, before, because I know you're going to give us a bit of a tour, but before you do that, could we hear a little bit about your story and how you have come to find or the business that you are now operating, which is Let It Rot?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fun and very different story on how I got here. I am a Crohn's disease patient. I have an autoimmune condition. And as part of my journey to health, I kind of dove in head first with organic eating and clean eating and healthy eating. And I got totally submersed in the green community here in Palm Beach County because it is pretty vast. And while I was on that journey, I was a college student at Florida Atlantic University, the Harriet Wilkes Honors College campus. And I took a class called Social Entrepreneurship. And that class challenged all of the students to come up with a business plan that expanded the vision or created an income for a nonprofit partner. And the year I took the class, our nonprofit partner was the Palm Beach County Food Bank. So when we did our initial site tour of the food bank, and they showed us all the things they'd like to fix or inefficiencies or potential income revenues they saw, one of the things that disturbed me the most was how much food they're throwing away. We have a really incredible gleaning program here in Palm Beach County. And farmers donate a lot of the food to Palm Beach County Food Bank, and then they do sorting, food recovery, and distribution. But in the process, sometimes there's hundreds to thousands of pounds of produce that is rotten, inedible, cannot be given out, and has to be thrown away. And they were not really doing anything with it. And we were looking at about 20,000 pounds of waste a year. So I wrote my business plan to compost the food scraps. And while I was writing it, I learned a little bit about composting in Florida. And I learned about worms, and I learned how valuable worms are. And I wrote a business where we took some of the garbage from the rotten donations, diverted them to a worm system, and then made soil that we could either sell or give back to the farmers that were donating the food. And when I was all done, my professors thought it was a good idea and offered me some help writing a grant. And I wrote a grant to do the business for real. And I got offered, after a couple different things happened, $25,000 to start Let It Rot. So I did.
Awesome.
I had no experience in farming and worm farming. The only compost I'd done was like a little cold compost hole in the back of my place. So it's been quite the journey to get to where I'm at. But now Let It Rot is a small scale worm farm where we process about a 0.5 ton to 1 ton of organic waste, mostly food waste, a week.
That's awesome. You know, just to for our viewers, just to break down how detrimental food waste is to the planet. And a lot of people don't realize that actually when food is wasting away in landfills, it's actually emitting greenhouse gases. And it's emitting one of the more destructive, which is methane, which is considered sort of 2 to 3 times more destructive than carbon dioxide. So the business itself is, you know, helping the planet, but also helping us make the most of food, which is on the front side, very taxing to produce to begin with. So it's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, so I think the like current statistics, at least per biocycle a few years ago, is like 40% of what goes to the landfill is for sure food waste and organic matter that will generate methane and carbon dioxide gas. For every 1 pound that winds up in the landfill, it has the potential to make just under 4 pounds of methane and carbon dioxide emissions. So something that I do with Let It Rot, for all my clients who participate, residents and businesses, I actually track how much garbage we've collected. So every time we pick up their trash, I weigh it and I put it into a spreadsheet. And last year for like Hanukkah, Christmas, New Year's, we sent out letters with the total waste diverted by Let It Rot, which was, I think, about 25,000 pounds. And how many greenhouse gas emissions we were able to prevent for each individual person based on their actual total, which was super cool. I have some people who have been composting with me for like 2 years now, and their effort alone has probably prevented like 4,000 to 5,000 pounds of greenhouse gases just from that one household who's been participating for a few years. So it doesn't seem like as an individual you have the power to make a big impact, but by tracking that weight for you, you can at any time ask me what your impact is and I can pretty much tell you. And it's very impressive. Like
That's awesome.
did the 25,000 pounds last year. That means that's like 100,000 pounds of greenhouse gases that this like tiny little farming space and 60 people who live here in Palm Beach County created, and it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. Melissa, I'm actually gonna have to do the same thing that we did with Kiki just so that we can stay on course, but we wanna have you back very soon. And so maybe just very quickly, you could tell us how your business would work, and if somebody wanted to use your services, what would that look like? Because as we've discussed, we'd love to see more people out of Delray making the most of their food waste by regenerating it back to the planet.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to talk and show you guys at the same time. So I have a pickup service, and we did recently start offering pickups in Delray, Boynton, and Boca Raton. For $10 a month, you get up to 2 of these buckets collected every other week. They're 5-gallon buckets. Generally, a family of 2 to 4 people only need one, but some of my vegan clients or juicer customers have a little extra. This gets picked up by currently someone who was a displaced service industry worker who I was able to give a job to. It's brought to this farm. It's composted in this big giant hot compost pile. And then it goes over under the roof where it gets fed to the worms. So
in the bins.
Yes, the cage here is my breeder worms. So these are the really spoiled, high class living, everything's taken care of for them worms. And then exactly. But they're my breeders. So I always have a healthy population of worms in case something happens with the science behind how composting occurs. All these other little containers and systems, including that cube over there, are filled with worms, but they're meant to actually process waste. So there's a lot more food waste going in there on a regular basis and less worms. I'm not worried about keeping those worms as happy as I am the ones here in the cage. As long as this population is stable, I can process a lot of garbage. Then I don't sell compost at all. I only make worm castings and sell worm castings because there are no laws or regulations on vermiculture and food waste processing in Palm Beach County.
Tell us what worm castings are.
Worm castings are worm poop. So this right here, this beautiful black dirt is actually 100% recycled materials. All of this was garbage about 8 to 12 months ago. You can see it doesn't look like garbage anymore, and this is meant to be an alternative to fertilizers and even certain pesticides, as it's a living growing medium that's filled with rich microbial biodiversity. And the microbes that live in here actually help the metabolic processes of breaking down nutrition in the soil and making it available for the plants in their root systems, so the plants don't have to just rely on water in order to eat. The bugs that live in this dirt help bring the food directly to them. And in turn, those bugs seek shelter in the root systems of the plants, which grow bigger, healthier, and stronger the more they eat all the good food the bugs are giving them.
I think it's also worth noting, just in terms of this whole concept of water running off of agricultural land and into the oceans, it's because you've got this really rich diversity within the soil that you have just created that makes it much more water absorbent. And I think that that's a key thing to share with people.
Absolutely. The benefits of composting and worm castings in your soil are tremendous. They increase the soil's ability to hold water, which is a major improvement, especially here in Florida, where the soil is very sandy. It's a lot of limestone rock, and we do have some pretty decent drainage if you're not in the swamp areas of the state. But the other thing about worm castings and using worm castings instead of a traditional fertilizer is the nutrient content is not as concentrated as your typical NPK fertilizers would be, which is just the standard nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus fertilizer you get in any garden store or home improvement store. But because it is alive, it's a living product, there's little tiny workers that help carry and distribute the nutrition that is available, whether it's from a fertilizer you add with the worm castings or what's available in the worm castings themselves. So you don't have to pour such high concentrations of these chemicals into the farmland you're working, so that stuff doesn't ever wind up in the groundwater system to begin with, because you're now working with much more reasonable numbers, not such high concentrations.
That's awesome. And thank you so much for this. I'm really excited to bring you back, because this is only just the tip of the iceberg of the things we intended to talk about. But what I really love about soil and this whole conversation is because I feel it's a great metaphor for society, and that we really need the same level of diversity and inclusion that really makes for healthy soil. We need that in society as well. And so I think this talk has been fantastic, because it really does point to how the world is interconnected. And the more that we can continue to sort of fine tune the natural rhythms and connectivity and relationships that happen in the natural world, the more that we can sort of fine tune the benefits that come from them. And I think that that's a really big part about thinking about designing, you know, a wiser sort of society and a wiser future, is to be thinking about how things do interconnect and how they optimize as dynamic systems. So extremely excited to continue this conversation, Melissa, and thank you for sharing what you have. But we will, how could people find you, by the way?
So I'll give you guys an action shot of the worms and I'll do my shout outs. Okay. I am on Instagram as Wormy Queen. I'm on Facebook at Let It Rot. I have a website, letitrot.org. And I think those are probably the best ways to get in touch with me.
And if you are not following Melissa on Instagram, you are missing out on some serious, insightful stories and just funny photos. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. Thank you for, partnering with us. This is just the beginning of sharing more of your story and your business. And also, if there's anyone that's interested in Delray or in South Palm Beach County to start pickups, we definitely recommend getting in touch with Melissa, and she'll tell you more. So thanks, and more soon.
Super easy.
Super easy. Look at those worms. They're beautiful. Okay. So next up we have Chef Blake, who is a chef at Space of Mind, and he runs the Community Kitchen Classroom, which is a relatively new initiative in Delray Beach. It's extremely exciting to see how this organization has taken what they were already working on, but have pivoted to really bring together some food solutions for the community. And WiseTribe is working with the Community Classroom Kitchen on a Meatless Monday effort, which is something that we've been doing. It's a global movement, actually, but because we've had some very wise young people sort of wake us up and say, hey, we've got to do this Meatless Monday movement in our community. Many of you might remember Young Valeria, and we've had a number of other young people really encourage our community to shift the way that we are making change in the world through our diets. And so we're going to continue some of that programming with the community classroom. And what Blake is going to do is really take us through a little demo of how you and your family can start to participate in Meatless Monday. So Blake, if you're ready, we are.
Absolutely. Hey, how's everybody doing? As Jacqueline was saying, I'm the chef here at Space of Mind, and we do this community classroom kitchen, which is providing meals to troubled families going through this time right now. We're doing a one-for-one meal box program where any meal purchased, we donate the same exact one to a nonprofit charity in the local area. And some of the meals that we focus on in this meal program are plant-based, vegetarian or vegan, even some raw dishes. And basically what that entails is just good stuff, not a lot of meat, no meat at all, to be honest with you, and then just good grains. And people, I think, get a little bit, I think there's a stigma, when you hear the word vegan or you hear the word vegetarian, that it's soggy tofu or bad packaged products, when everything you've heard up until this point, like I'm getting goosebumps listening to aquaponic farms and compost, and because that's one where the world was at, and two, where it should be right now. Us in this country, we're very meat centric, we're very meat forward. And it's not one of the best diets to have. When you look at other countries around the world, it's very vegetable plate forward, and meat is very little. If they want to eat meat, it's just smaller portions, and it's maybe once or twice a week, if that. And what you've heard so far through all these other amazing speakers is, it's just impacting, the way that it impacts the earth. Through methane, through soil erosion, the vast amounts of land that's needed for cattle. And even when we do have meat, I think it's a very big educational process for us as Americans to understand that, a cow isn't just hamburger, or chicken isn't just legs and breasts. We don't, yeah, chicken, exactly, or chicken nuggets, we're very big into the processing of food here, not in the terms of chemicals, so to speak, but just in the terms of getting it, not knowing where it comes from, not knowing what it is, and it's packaged in cellophane and styrofoam and given to you. And I think we're very desensitized when it comes to that kind of stuff. And it's very important as we go through our life to understand the most important thing, to understand where our food comes from, and to have respect for it. And
actually, you're just bringing up a good point. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but WiseTribe will be increasingly talking about this concept of food citizenship, And so, you know, to date, we really have been food consumers. And the point that you're making is showing, you know, we really haven't thought thoroughly and clearly and holistically about our food sources and what that means, and what sort of rights and responsibilities that we would have to the food sector as participants in the overall system. So I think that the point that you're making, and I just want to add a few points around citizenship, because we're going to be putting out a challenge, an 8-week challenge with the Community Classroom Kitchen, to encourage families to do an 8-week Meatless Monday challenge. And this is really on the notion of certainly all of us coming together to make a difference through our diets, but it's also a function of our civics. And the idea of Meatless Monday is actually a 100-year-old idea. And it started out in World War I, and it was under the slogan of "Food will win the war." And so what we were talking about was this notion of Meatless Mondays and Wheatless Wednesdays, so that we could ration our food sources to make sure that our soldiers had enough to eat and that they were going to be strong. And so then actually in 2003, the global Meatless Monday movement that I think a lot of us think about, and to your point, what you got started, that people sort of back off and say, oh, it's this vegan thing, you know, it's sort of this militant approach to eating animals. Well, actually the global movement got started by Johns Hopkins Center for Public Health for a Livable Future, and that what they were doing, it was really out of health. The problem with our diets, and increasingly has been a problem with our diets, the modern diets, is that it's filled with saturated fats. And there was a huge, and there still is a huge problem with chronic diseases, but particularly at the time, Johns Hopkins was really concerned about heart health. And so they said the easiest way to get consumers to take 15% of saturated fat out of their diet was go one day without meat. And so it's meat and full fat dairy that is extremely saturated fat rich foods. And so it's not just really for the planet, it's not just sort of saving animals, it's also for our health. And so I just wanted to add that because it adds a little context of what you were saying. And really, we want to encourage everyone to join us with Space of Mind, with our junior WiseTribers in this Meatless Monday challenge for a sake of civics, not only sort of restoring our planet, but also restoring our health.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry, go right ahead.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. I was going to add about it is, you know, this book that we talked about prior to this meeting, the
Small Planet Diet.
Small Planet Diet. I was looking through it and like online that I'm going to have, and it's quite amazing. I haven't read it yet, and it's on my definite to do in the next few days. But it just talks about, you know, more of a plant-based diet. And things around things in your kitchen can be very easy to find or to purchase, such as, you know, I have some rice right here, some really nice organic white rice out of Jacksonville from a local farm called Congaree and Penn. Some red quinoa, organic quinoa. This is Israeli couscous. This is a pearl pasta. And then just some really nice whole wheat enriched organic pasta as well. And the list can go on and on. Beans, lentils, split peas, you know, there's nothing wrong with having these things in your home, especially when they're dried and they don't go bad, opposed to having to try to figure out what to consume as far as like your meat goes, which has a very short shelf life to begin with. So I wanted to actually show you a little quick recipe, something that we're going to be just kind of a little taste of what our meatless meals are going to be for the 8-week challenge. We're going to do a little sweet potato hummus in a style that you might not have seen before. You know, hummus doesn't have to always be chickpeas and tahini, which is a ground sesame paste. Anything can, you know, the word hummus has been translated to be many things that you've seen around: edamames, lentils, carrots, sweet potatoes, white bean. So we're going to do this. I'm going to do this recipe real quick, and you guys can take a quick look at it. I also have shared the recipe with Jacqueline, and if you'd like, she has it, and she can send it to you, and you can do it in your home. Very simple, very, very simple. We're going to start with 1.5 pounds of sweet potatoes. These are nice organic sweet potatoes. As you can see, because they're nice, tiny, they're not perfect. Not everything needs to be beautifully round and a certain big size. You know, that's not the way vegetables grow. We're going to take this 1.5 pound of sweet potatoes. It's going to be peeled and it's going to be diced into a large cube. You're going to toss it with a little bit of oil, sunflower oil, or a nice olive oil. A couple of cloves of garlic, as you have here, crushed up, chopped, and then that's going to get all tossed together in a pan. You're going to put it onto a baking pan into your oven, center rack at 350 degrees for about 10 to 12 minutes. You can test it with a knife or a bamboo skewer. If it goes through with very little resistance, it's done. After it's come out, you're going to get something that looks like this.
Voila.
All right. Voila. You have some caramelization on some of those, which is really good. That's what we want. And as you can see, it's very soft, almost soft to the touch. It goes right like that. So what we're going to do is, this is a food processor. You can use something like this, or if you have a blender works. And if you don't have anything like this, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. It's not going to have that smooth consistency of hummus. It's going to have a little bit more, as we'll say, a rustic or Provençal style kind of hummus, which is perfectly fine. In fact, that's how I like potatoes anyways. I like a nice lumpy potato instead of the smooth, smooth mashed potato, more consistency. So we're gonna put our sweet potatoes in there with the chopped garlic. This is the tahini paste that I was speaking of. Now this might be a little bit of a unique ingredient to you, but it's really just ground up sesame. So we're gonna put 3 tablespoons of tahini in here. We're gonna take a squeeze of fresh lemon. Pinch of salt, pepper. We're gonna pulse this. Now while that's going, I'm just gonna take some ice cold water. And you're going to keep on adding this until it gets to this really nice, smooth consistency. Now, I didn't add oil to this just because I don't like too much. I don't like that thick oil, like thick hummus. So this is going to make it a lot thinner. And then we're going to add flavor to the hummus when we plate. I mean, that's how I like to make it. I like to make it nice, smooth, and creamy, and water will do that. And then I'll add a nice oil on top, seasoning, nuts, and stuff like that. There we have it. Nice, smooth sweet potato with a little tahini. I'm gonna put some in here in this bowl. Now, like I said, this can be done with cooked lentils. This can be done with cooked carrots. This can be done with edamame. It can be done with white beans. I've done a white bean hummus before. It's really whatever you like, whatever your preference is. So we have our nice bowl of hummus, right? So I'm just going to make a little indentation here. I'm going to hit it with a little bit more salt, pepper, a touch of this organic. This is avocado oil.
Ooh.
Some toasted pumpkin seeds, and this is a little this is like a chili tahini spice that I made. It's dehydrated lemon, chili flakes, salt, cumin, coriander, but you could put anything you in here. If you wanted to do something more of a Middle Eastern style, you could do like a za'atar spice, which is sumac based with garlic and cumin and chili. You could do a dukkha spice, which is more of a North African with nuts and chilies as well. So I'm gonna throw a little bit of that on here.
Eat it. How long did it take you to make?
The spice?
Yeah.
A few, probably 5-6 minutes. It was just toasting aromatics and then grinding them in the in the
Coffee grinder.
in a coffee grinder or a mortar and pestle sometimes, depending on how coarse I want the spice. And that was that's another thing on a side note. And I could ramble all day about about food, but making your own spices is very important. One, it cuts down on it's just better. All those spices you have that are in grocery stores are just dead. When you toast whole spice, it wakes it up, it livens it up. And that way you can make what you want. And plus, a lot of spices you'll find have a lot of salt, a lot of sometimes MSG. So you got to always make sure you're reading what you're getting. But if you look, I can move this down a little bit. I don't know if you guys can see that, but this is our beautiful sweet potato hummus with the chili tahini, toasted pumpkin seeds, and avocado oil. Yeah,
Yum.
and that's served with some pita chips. It can be served with just crispy lavash. It can be served with vegetables, raw crudité, and you're good to go. And as you saw, obviously there's a little bit of magic in the kitchen where I cooked it prior, but probably within 15 to 20 minutes, it's done. Cheaper than buying it, better and tastier than buying it. Show off to your friends.
Exactly.
And you're cutting down on just a ton of just wrapped up and purchased product with plastics and wraps and all that stuff. So it's just I think the whole conversation of where we were in the beginning of this to where I am doing this now is just about less energy put into everything to make it more simplified and make it better.
And what we call in systems thinking, that is basically fine-tuning system dynamics, right? So that you basically extract what is the unnecessary sort of production, which ends up sort of bloating systems, which ends up sort of creating all these other problems. And this is why we love food, because we think it's such an excellent way to teach young people about systems thinking, which we think is a vital discipline, particularly as we begin rethinking the future of civics. So that's sort of a little philosophy to add to this, but it's been a beautiful demonstration, and we're extremely excited to work with you, Chef Blake, and with the Community Classroom Kitchen. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Community Classroom Kitchen.
And we're really excited to see what other dishes that you're going to show us and coach us on. And we'll be back with more for our viewers on how they can get involved with this Food Citizenship Challenge for Meatless Monday. So stay tuned on that. And thanks again. We look forward to more. And with that, we basically are ready to wrap up. And so before we do that, we just want to let everyone know that WiseTribe is actually working. We've got a feeding program that we're working on in response to the COVID-19 crises. This is something that we're working on with another local nonprofit known as Eat Better, Live Better. We've effectively adopted 40 families, and our program is not really just around sort of providing food. It's actually providing food sustainability. A lot of what we talked about today, really encouraging these families to get into composting, to reduce their waste, but also building food production solutions in the community. So Mason and Aqua Gardens they've already helped us with implementing some aquaponics, and we've got a few other sort of test families. We're just waiting on some additional equipment to arrive, and we'll feature those stories and those families so that you can learn from them how they are really turning their backyards into food production opportunities. So if you'd like to donate to that program, you are more than welcome to do that. The donation is donate.wisetribe.us. And we are also looking for volunteers if anyone wants to help us with this program, both in the community, but also we've got desk work that you could do. That would be great. And if you are looking for a worthy nonprofit to donate your time and effort and funding to, WiseTribe is definitely a place that you should look more into, and we would welcome your partnership. This is certainly trying times, and we are in a moment of adaptation, and we are so excited to be working with everyone. We thank all of our presenters today for doing a great job. We're extremely excited to bring back Kiki a few more times, because actually today is just the beginning of the story that she'll be telling with us. And then certainly also Mel, the Worm Queen. We look forward to showing you her full backyard and having more of a structural conversation around systemic food systems and the changes that we need to make from a policy perspective if we're really going to attune food to earth production and earth friendly practices. So with that, I just want to thank everyone again for joining us, and we will see you guys on the internets and hopefully in the community. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.